NBC News reported on October 20th, 2020, that lawyers appointed to identify the migrant families separated by the Trump administration have yet to find the families of over 500 immigrant children, and that 2/3 of those parents have been deported. According to PewResearch.org, last updated in 2020, almost 350,000 immigrants were unlawfully deported in 2018, almost a 20% increase over the previous year. Today, I'd like to share with you 3 reasons why you should become an active voter and become involved in political issues. First, I'd like to talk about how media portrayal of political issues can skew our political perspectives. Second, I'd like to talk about how seeking change due to misinformation can actually cause us to lose our rights. And lastly, I'd like to talk about how stories like those immigrant children can be avoided if we just become active voters. I want to start off by talking about how media portrayal of political issues can actually skew our political perspectives. Media can actually be very informative, but creates bias by talking about what stories are told and how they're told. With the immigrant children, the Trump administration was heavily blamed. However, history tells us that we've been separating families since the 1800s. This is not a new phenomenon. The current administration is also emphasized because the media doesn't portray previous administrations. In fact, ICE.gov, last updated in 2020, tells us that the deportation numbers are actually double under our previous leadership. Now that you've heard about how media portrayal can actually skew our political perspectives, I want to talk about how seeking change due to misinformation can actually cause us to lose our rights. Seeking change due to misinformation can hinder our rights as free citizens. Propaganda is deeply rooted in American history. During the Great Depression, immigrants were heavily targeted because they were taking jobs from white Americans. And as a result, white Americans used specifically Mexican Americans as scapegoats because of their own unemployment issues. We hear stories about kids in cages, and this is a terrible, terrible thing. The media's portrayal of their suffering causes us to act impulsively, and as a result, we end up mistakenly voting on what ends up being harsher laws than we intended, and that will affect our rights as citizens. Now that you've heard about how misinformation can actually make us lose our rights, I'd like to talk about how stories like the immigrant children can be avoided by becoming informed voters. Educating ourselves can help us uncover the truth of all issues instead of being sold by the picture that's being painted. Ultimate.org, last updated in 2020, tells us that voting can bring much, much needed change. However, those policies that we vote on can actually have a lot of side effects that can harm our rights. Politicians have a track record of being deceitful. We see in these commercials that they are seen as heroes. However, in other commercials, those sources are actually uncovering all the wrongdoings of those politicians. What are we supposed to believe? Where are we supposed to get our information from? That's for us to research and decide for ourselves. Now, laws can always seem like that they only have a positive impact in our lives, but this isn't always the case. In the fall 2008 issue of Context, it details bills that promised clean air and statewide improvements. But the money for these projects actually raised our taxes, raised our gas prices, and also increased our vehicle registration prices. The stories about separated families depicted by the media can also hinder our votes because it creates a biased narrative. This causes us to place untruthful blame on political figures that may actually be beneficial to our country. And as a result of that bias, the media can steer us into wrongly voting on issues and people that we have not researched fully yet, jeopardizing our rights as people. Today I talked to you about 3 reasons why you should become an active voter and why you should become involved in political issues. First, media portrayal of political issues can skew our political perspectives. Second, seeking change due to misinformation can actually strip our rights as citizens. And lastly, stories like those separated immigrant children can actually be avoided by becoming active voters and informed. Now, the next time you hear about a political story, I hope that you research the fact for yourself and make an educated vote to prevent the atrocities that place children halfway across the world from their families.